Charlie here is one of the voices of Medito. And actually, Charlie, just to begin with, I just want to say a huge thank you because, as you probably know, everybody's a volunteer who works on Medito. So, it's amazing to have somebody with your skills on the team because it makes a huge difference. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I really enjoy recording them.
Oh, great. So how did you find out about Medito to begin with?
Well, it was kind of it was a very simple thing I was looking for, which was just a basic meditation timer. And it's remarkably difficult to find one that doesn't. I mean, there are some websites or something like that, but I just wanted an app with just the timer on it that I could just set the amount of time I want and hear a nice calm bell at the beginning and a nice calm bell at the end, nothing else in the middle. And because the phone alarm just is completely disruptive to the meditative process, if you have some timer on the phone. And I found Medito through that, and then I saw that there were other guided meditations as well, which after doing some with just the timer, I thought I'll check some of these out. So I think Will was the one who did most of or still does most of the guided meditations. And so listening to him guide me through meditation, which was very helpful. And then there was one moment when I was meditating. And of course, when you're meditating, the thoughts kind of come in your mind and you're supposed to let them go out. But one thought came out of my mind. I was just like, wait a second, I could do this. I could read some of these things, And then I think the next day or the week after or something like that, very soon after that, I wrote you and sent that picture with, Charlie McGuire asking to volunteer.
So what was that? That must have been was that a couple of years ago now? Maybe a year and a half.
I think it was October 2020.
Okay, wow.
So it was during COVID, and that was like, I guess it was an extension of my, my personal COVID revelation was that voice acting is the thing for me to do. Telling stories really is the thing for me to do, and so I'm actually really glad that you sort of intuited that the sleep stories were the thing for me to do. I can do the guided meditations. I don't mind doing that, but the stories are much more, they speak to me more, and or maybe I speak to them more, No, but and so it was earlier that year that I sort of made that revelation, and then later in that year in October, I wrote you guys.
So you've done a lot of stories. I would love to get you doing some more meditations as well, actually, because you're one of my favorite voices on the app.
Thank you.
To be honest. I would love to hear you even more across the other types of content as well.
That'd be cool.
But saying that, I do think you do the stories so well. But I guess that's what you do, right? You like for your living, you record stories, right?
I do I do all kinds of voice acting. Sorry, I got some. I do all kinds of voice acting. Most of what I do, especially here, so I'm living in Czech Republic. For those who don't know, I live in Prague, and so most of the voice acting that I do here is dubbing, like dubbing a Czech version of something, or doing a English version of a video that was originally made in Czech, that they're making for the European audience, so to speak.
Okay, cool.
And but so they're not exactly stories, but what I've kind of come to realize is that there are stories really in anything, actually, and even in commercials where you think that they're just trying to sell something. It was like I was talking to a friend of mine who does voice acting. And he said, and we were reading this label for a raincoat, and it's just like designed to keep the strongest Cornish winds off of your back, blah 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 blah. And you kind of read it in this way, like designed to read the something, and it sort of immediately sounds like a voice actor, like kind of performance. But if you look a little bit behind there and you see, like, you kind of create some story, like you're like, you know what, this person doesn't want to be wet. This person hates being wet. In fact, rain is his least favorite weather, but he bought this raincoat, and this one is designed for the strongest Cornish downpours, and immediately once you have this story in your mind, like it just speaks through you, and actually I think you gave me a direction for the sleep stories that really helped too with that, which was that you always read it like you're speaking, like you're reading it to a friend, that's what you tell, I think, a lot of your actors. And it's so clarifying then, once there's a like a relate if I just have a block of text and I have to read in a certain way, then then I can just read it in some kind of way that sounds like it should be read, and there's some kind of bravado there and some kind of thing. But if there's a human relationship or a human interaction there, like between or some experience that can be sort of portrayed, then then you can really just get right into it. And so
Mm.
so you're asking me if I did this for my work, and like I do it a lot with the commercials, or if they have something like I did one a couple weeks ago for this. The translated name of the company is Clean Energy of Tomorrow. So they're doing like nuclear energy, wind, solar, and all this stuff for Czech Republic. And yeah, I just put in my mind something like, okay, you know, these guys they work with electricity, so there's power there, but it's the smooth hum of electricity, not this loud chug of the oil and steam engines.
Mm.
And it's that clean buzz, it's that looking forward, and so you kind of create some persona of this person, and then you read the script,
Yeah.
and then it just kind of comes out naturally. And so I can find, even though like doing commercials and stuff is not as like creatively inspiring or as fulfilling as doing kind of like more meaningful stories, more human oriented stories, you can still find a story there. And in fact, it's what makes some of them so good is because you feel that there's a story there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like finding enthusiasm for something, isn't it? And
Yeah.
um, well, I was just watching your your on your website, the one you did for the flying car. That must have
Oh
been
yeah.
pretty cool, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. That was cool. That was a good one.
Have you seen the film King Richard with Will Smith?
I don't think I have.
So
No.
he plays the father of Venus and Serena Williams, and
Mm,
at one point in that film, he sits them down almost as a punishment and makes them watch Cinderella. And then the film finishes, and he says, and they go to leave, and he said, "No, you're not leaving until you tell me what the moral of the story was." And I thought that was quite like
huh.
a poignant moment, and he was going to make them watch it again and again until they could tell him the moral of the story. Um,
How did
and
they react to that? The
so I
girls.
think to begin with, they were like, "Oh no, we're not going to do this." But then he kind of made them do it, and then
Hmm.
they highlighted the things. I think it was kindness to all people and forgiveness,
Hmm.
uh, and and then you can. It's like seeing them actually thinking about it and
Hmm.
taking in the moral of the story. And all of these, like I think every story, like if you watch a movie or you read a book, like everything points kind of in the same direction. Most of the time, stories come through with compassion and kindness and
Hmm.
mindfulness in some cases,
Hmm.
and generally, I think stories do point us in the direction of the truth. It's
Yeah.
just sometimes the actual words of the story can be confused for the actual truth when actually there's a
Hmm.
deeper underlying meaning of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that probably does apply, like you were saying, to any of these, these commercials or because even for a
Yeah.
commercial, the company is trying to connect with people on a real level, and there's
Right.
this underlying truth that we all share,
Hmm.
and usually that comes down to compassion, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. Compassion, and I think yeah, yeah. It's like compassion is the sort of relational, like in an individual. This sounds, it's going to be like a huge oversimplification, but I think fundamentally people just want to feel good, and
Mm,
not in this sort of hedonistic feel good sort of way, but like the deeper that good feeling goes, the happier they are. So it's like it starts always with that, like, oh, I just don't want to be uncomfortable. But then once you're comfortable, then you're like, yeah, but now I need, and you can sort of look at this as like people always wanting more, they always want to get the better thing. But I think that there is a deep sense of holistic goodness, that is achievable, that people are looking for. And
mm,
compassion is the sort of relational aspect of that, helping others achieve that goodness, right?
mm,
That you can see, that you understand what you're looking for in yourself, and you know that some person might be lacking something of some aspect of that in their lives, or that you can just provide it naturally, and therefore it's easy to do that. And this kind of on the outside appears as compassion, you know.
Yeah.
But it's this, you're right, it's this goodness, it's this, that all these stories kind of go for. And the sort of suspect thing about these commercials is that, of course, their main reason for existing is to sell something, you know.
Mhm.
Our main reason for existing is not to sell or buy anything. We have a myriad of reasons probably that we can list, and probably a whole bunch more that we don't know about. But uh, but so it's a little different there. But yeah, there's still, but they do reach some truth, and when they do reach
Mhm.
truth, that's what speaks to people, and that's what makes those people connect on a deeper level with the product they're buying. Of course, the product then
Yeah.
has to carry that value as well. You know, if the product is just some limp McDonald's hamburger and you think you're going to find happiness in there, then maybe you might be a little disappointed after a few burgers. But you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, exactly. So I think money does corrupt things to a certain extent, because if the
mm,
company just wants to make money and that is their sole purpose for existing, then then they could potentially use stories to manipulate people into doing something that really they don't want to do, like
mm-hmm,
buying a hamburger.
mm-hmm,
Um, that's no good for anybody, really.
mm-hmm,
But they try to convince you that that will make you happy.
mm-hmm.
Um, but there's this guy Simon Sinek who wrote a book called "Start with the Why," and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's suggesting that that's the direction that businesses need to go in. It's you you don't tell them what you're selling, you tell them why you're selling it,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and that why should be something that connects you with the person you're selling something to, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess with Medito, because we're not trying to make money,
Mm-hmm.
the great thing is that it kind of gets rid of that the corrupting
Yeah.
power of money from the beginning, and
Yeah.
everybody who's working on the project is doing it because everybody believes in mindfulness and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's a great thing. So with the sleep stories,
Mm-hmm.
um, people are writing stories, and we can. And what's interesting, you see it coming through, is that it seems like uh, the important things in life come through in these stories, because people can write pretty much whatever they want. They have, I guess, they have to be relaxing, but
Mm-hmm.
things that are coming through are like the beauty of nature that comes through a lot. Like
Yeah.
we have like dozens of people writing sleep stories, and often that comes through the beauty of nature,
Mm-hmm.
and appreciating that, and taking time to look around you and see what's there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
And
it's great
there's
to
very
see.
rarely dialogue too in those stories. Every once in
Mm,
a while you'll find it, but mostly it's observation and sensing. And I think it sounds like a lot of the writers had some sort of, you know, either they've just listened to a lot of guided meditations or they have some training, because they really, a lot of the stories go into a lot of, you know, there's some slight breath work in some of them. You know, there's like the
mm,
sensory meditation that sometimes they bring in, like, you know, you feel the tingling of your toes, you know, and it's in the
yeah,
story and it fits in the story. It doesn't sound like you just drag it in. Um, so yeah, they are really good. But actually, I wanted to backtrack a little bit, just because I wanted to ask you about, if you don't mind me asking a question here,
sure.
that they Medito, you know, like, there was this, especially growing up, I felt that the world was sort of, that because things are driven by money, you know, and this is like the young high school mind, you know, because things are driven by money, that everything is kind of, you know, screwed because of that, you know, that there's always going to be this sort of, you know, um, like a motivator, like a sort of a malintent motivator, sort of, you know, even though it doesn't have any intention, you know, but like that when it's in the equation, people begin to behave in some sort of different way, you know, which can be destructive, can be selfish, can be, you know, can have malintent. And and it's a strange thing, but then you have started Medito as a, you, I mean, you and your team have started Medito as like a, as a, from the ground up, you know, totally free. And and yet there are other companies that, you know, that do it for profit, you know, and are able to, you know, hire, you know, these, not like, you know, like, what was the one, Cillian Murphy, I heard reading something, you know, and I was like, wow, that must have been an expensive sleep story, you know?
Yeah.
And then they pay some membership and they get all these things. And then because, oh, Cillian Murphy, I like Cillian Murphy, and I'll pay for this membership, you know, and then it kind of
Mm.
keeps it going and they get more and more. And they can have this sort of wild, expansive growth. But you guys have been doing Medito for quite half a decade now, I guess, right? Maybe more?
Less than that. No, it's only
Less than that.
only 2.5 years actually. So
Oh,
when you
really?
joined, that was very close to the beginning. Yeah.
Wow. It's really
Yeah.
that's impressive because it seemed when I joined that you guys had already had quite a strong following. Well, so then how do you see this like going forward? How do you like do you ever worry that like you're not going to be able to keep up, or do you have this like confidence of the mission of the message? Like
Yeah, I think we're definitely growing a lot more slowly than we would be if we could take investment. So and we can't take investment because we're a registered nonprofit. Um,
hmm
like we have emails. I don't know how real these emails are, but we get them quite a lot. Like people just emailing saying we're interested in purchasing your app, and we just either ignore them or reply saying we're never going to sell the app and we can't because it's owned by a nonprofit.
hmm
Um, um, but like if you
hmm
look at the number of users that we have, like the amount of users we have, we for a for-profit app we could easily get millions in investment.
hmm
But like I said, we can't do that, and we don't want to do that. So there is more of just this slow growth because everything is done by volunteers, and we all have full-time jobs outside of what we're doing. Um, so, but we're seeing this regular increase in number of users,
hmm
which is the direction we want to be going in. And I think part of the reason that um, it has grown so fast, like we're approaching 1.5 million downloads now. Um,
Oh,
and
congratulations.
I think in just over 2 years, I think that's more than what we expected. And I think it's because people see what we're doing and they believe in the mission as well. So
hmm
um, it does seem wrong that mindfulness can be co-opted and sold for massive profits, making
hmm
investors rich when it's been around for thousands of years.
hmm
Um, and yeah,
Yeah.
I think people understand that and they want to get behind it. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of people um, putting their hat in to do some volunteering with us. So much so that it was kind of hard to manage on that front.
hmm
Because, and often, especially if people say they want to volunteer, but they haven't got a specific idea of what to do, like you came to us with a very specific way that you could
hmm
contribute. If somebody's just like, I can help, but they're not really sure how, then it's
Yeah.
hard when we have lots and lots of people doing that. It's
hmm
kind of gets difficult. Um,
mm
but it's just a good sign that we're heading in the right direction and we are continuing to grow. And
mm.
yeah, I think hopefully just the more word spreads, I think word of mouth is just a great thing for us as
Yeah.
well because it spreads because people believe in what we're doing.
Mhm.
So yeah, hopefully
That's good.
eventually people can just never have to pay a subscription to meditate. They
Yeah.
just really go hand in hand, I don't think.
It would be nice if there was some sort of some common knowledge about it. It's just so interesting. Like you say, it's been around thousands of years, and I'm not saying that I have some kind of regimented mindfulness practice that I do. But there were times in my life when I meditated every day, and I sort of have these in my belt. But just that it's sort of in now, to have these meditation apps. But then the more that it's good because it's sort of fashionable in one way. People are like, oh yeah, I like this. But then there's some quiet moment when they realize like
Mm,
that it actually has some deeper effect, right? Than just like this cool thing I do sometimes, and
yeah.
then it starts to spread this way, which begins to transcend the subscriptions and transcends the investments, and
Mm,
it's just like, oh yeah, that's something I want to have in my life whether I pay for it or not.
yeah.
So maybe that's where Medito can
Yeah, because
stay
it kind of it is transformative in the way that it changes the way you perceive the world and it
mm,
changes the way that you relate to other people and the way that you act.
mm,
Um, and the more the and also really the idea is that once you've learned how to meditate, once you become more mindful, you don't necessarily have to use an app all the time.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. The apps that have subscriptions, all they want to do is keep you using the app forever and ever and
Exactly.
ever.
Yeah.
Like that's not really our goal. Our goal is
Hmm.
to make a more mindful world.
Hmm.
So so if people can learn how to meditate or learn how to be more mindful and to be more compassionate, then then yeah, hopefully they don't need to use the app forever. Like they could,
Right.
like, there are things to come back to the app for, like because we like hearing about philosophical ideas and learning about different ways to practice.
Hmm.
But yeah, like that's our goal is to transform ourselves, to improve mental well-being, and like it has a knock-on effect. Like society, imagine a society where everybody's main priority was to approach things with mindfulness and compassion. Like
Oh my gosh.
it would be a very different world, wouldn't
It would be. I can imagine traffic jams being a very pleasant
it?
affair, you know?
Yeah, yeah, traffic jam can actually be a good opportunity to practice being patient and
Yeah, yeah.
to be just be aware without judgment and with acceptance of what's going on, just like sit there with
Mhm.
acceptance. And it can be
Yeah.
more difficult um, than said. And actually, because I was actually in a car with my friend, and he had a little bit of road rage, and I said something along those lines to him, and that did not help.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that just increased his road rage.
What are you talking about? I'm calm. I'm
Yeah,
calm right now.
exactly.
Yeah, but sometimes, like I will say that there's a reverse knock-on effect of, that if you go in, you're on the road and you're like, well, we're in a traffic jam, and then you hear someone behind you like honking, it's like, move, then you're like,
Mm.
then you feel that tension a little bit, and then you kind of go a little faster, and then you push that other guy, and there's this like
Yeah, yeah.
this effect. But every once in a while, like I love that photo of this photo. This is one of these photos that changed my life. I think it was at the running of the bulls or something, or it was some event in Spain, and you see like it was just a picture of the crowd, and like everyone is there, like with their phones, like doing the things. They're trying to get a photo of what's going on, and there's like one little old lady who's just like watching just by herself. I think probably many people have seen it because it was on the internet like 6 years ago, so that means the whole world knows about it. But it just was like this image of one person kind of taking that moment differently, instead of thinking about where they're going to be experiencing that moment or what they thought about in the past in that moment. This is when this is a true mindful experience, that this person is just sitting there. And it's because not mindfulness isn't always about meditation, it's just about being in the present
Mm,
moment, right?
exactly.
And so you can be in this traffic jam and you can say like, okay, well, I'm not where I intended to be at this time. I'm a little late, but you know, mm, but it's a blue sky out there,
Mm,
and I've got a moment to rest, and but of course, then once you get to your thing and everyone's like, "What are you doing? You should have left earlier." Then you feel, oh man, then there's this thing. But again, if there was this mindfulness on their side of like, well, yeah, traffic jams happen sometimes. Was it nice? Did you take some time to enjoy it?
yeah.
Sometimes, yeah, I can imagine that being a really different thing. But probably, it wouldn't be so good for capitalism in a certain way. I wonder like how the because this is that thing is that this um, the sort of the engine of this world economy is based on a certain level of consumerism. There's a consumerism of needed things like food, but there's also like, Apple comes out with a new iPhone every year, and they really need you to
Mm,
buy that because that's a big part of their income, and but like I have this Samsung Galaxy S9, which I bought used when I got it, and the screen's a little janky, the battery's going out, but it's still kind of
mm,
working, and so I like there's there yeah, so like what would happen if everyone kind of took the time to really like ask themselves in this moment if they needed something more, would things kind of would we go quieter? Would we not be able to react to that meteor coming? Or would we,
mm,
would it be like just a peaceful, earth-centered, human-centered society?
yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine, isn't it? Because
mm,
like the good with mindfulness, you can be more mindful about consumerism, and you can think about
it's
like,
true.
what do I really need this? new device, or um, and I think it can help us to become less materialistic.
Mm.
Um, but then moving to a world where everybody was like that, um, I guess it, because the thing is with that situation is that the corporations that sell us stuff, they're like, that's where all the power lies, right?
Mm.
So taking the but then people taking the power back by just like realizing that they don't need those things, and then the money stops going to them, and then I don't know, will the money go into the things that it needs to go into? Like, I don't know,
Yeah,
like
that's
healthcare
a
and
logistical question, right?
yeah.
But yeah, somehow, like, I trust that it would, I
Mm,
trust that it would, because I think that, um, maybe we talked about this when we met in London. I don't remember, but there's one philosopher who was talking about holons. Do you know a holon? Do you know the
no.
name of it? Well, I'll describe it. Maybe it'll come to me later. But this guy was basically saying that the universe is made up of systems. That the universe is a system, and a holon, if I'm saying that word term correctly, comment in the if it's something different, comment below. But a holon is basically a system that both contains systems and is contained within a system.
Mhm,
And so it's essentially just like a segment of a fractal, if you think about that. And to me, this is a pretty good way of imagining the way the world works, because we are a system. We have different systems
mm,
in our body, like the digestive system, the immune system, the neurological system, um, nervous system, let's say. And all of those together make the system of the human body. And then we are in the system of society, in the system of like the ecosystem, in the system of like our solar system, right? And each of these affect each other. And like, we're created by all the systems inside of us, and all the systems inside of us create the system of us, which then affects the systems outside of us.
mm,
And the only way for a system to kind of work is if there's an equal amount of input and output, right? As if like, if it's not that way, then the system just breaks down because it cannot subsist anymore. If there's too much input, right, it'll just, well, I'm not sure actually. If there's too much input, I guess it would just sort of cancerously expand. I'm not sure, or it would
yeah, that's how
explode or
exploded,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how the
Uh,
universe started.
yeah, maybe that's how it started, right? There was too much input, and then it was just all this output. And now we're in that phase of the output phase, and that's an interesting question. I wonder.
Mm,
I wonder about the Big Bang, but as far as like human beings go, as far as the planet goes, I mean, talk about climate change is just like too much input of one thing into our system, which is causing a destabilization of the system, which, if we don't do something about it, will change that entire system,
mm,
not permanently, but it will just, but for a couple million years probably, which we'll have to see if we survive that, like
mm,
it. And I so but there is a way that we can sort of observe that, and kind of work with that, I guess. So going back to this point of like, will the money kind of go in the right places? One of the things that brings me hope about this world, is the internet is a source of ire for a lot of people, and a lot of, but I think that having the internet, uh, if the internet is, as it is designed to be, like a free and open source tool for humanity, it can
mm,
really serve as a connector of experience. Like, these think this way, where in the old days, where it was just an orator or some storyteller passing on what happened a million miles away, so that those people could experience what was going on there. Now I can just like log on and just Google Tokyo, and then suddenly I have like a live footage of like a Tokyo intersection and people talking and interacting there. I'm like, and I turn it off and I'm back in Prague. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, and and
yeah,
even things like war, for example, like in World War One. And I say World War One, even, well, let's even go further, before film, that the soldiers would go off to war, they'd march off to war, and then they'd come back and they'd have this like blank look in their eyes, and everyone was like, what the hell happened there? And no one knew, and no one who wasn't there would know. And they would always just tell stories, but it was these sort of secondary experiences. Now, you know, I can just go onto Reddit and find like footage from yesterday from Ukraine, and I can
Mm.
immediately be connected to it. And it's not like it's not about like going into this violence, but the minute that I think the more people that experience that violence directly, not again, I'm not advocating that you go on and look at war footage, but I think
With
that
access to the truth, I guess, right?
exactly, exactly. Like before, it's just like, well, those Ukrainians, they were asking for it, or something like that. Like there was this mindset where you're not connected to the actual effect of like, wait a
Mm.
second, these are children and these are men and women, innocent people who are dying and suffering as a result of this, and you can sort of see that, and you don't need to like go through all the footage, but just to see that it's there, to know that it's instead of some distant, far away thing, that's I don't know anything about, and I just have my opinions, and you know so to have access to this, like is is a great way to make people aware of how to function in the system, so that like
Mm.
so they begin to make choices that discourage war, begin to make choices that encourage like cooperation. You see like this huge outpouring of support for the Ukrainian people from all around the world, um, which probably wouldn't have happened if if there wasn't such a strong like online presence of that,
Yeah.
and of course,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it has, I guess there are ups and downs of social media and the internet. But
mhm,
I was listening to, I think it was an Aubrey Marcus podcast recently, and he used a good analogy. So he talked about when humans discovered fire, and um, before we knew how to manage fire and to use it safely, like forests would be burned down because people would like spark a fire and it would just like spread everywhere and it would destroy everything. Um, and then over time, people learned how to create a fire and use it safely and use it
mhm,
massively to our advantage. And he said that social media in its current state, like it's still brand new, really, isn't it? Basically,
yeah,
and he said it's in the current state. It's like this time when we've just discovered fire and it's spreading everywhere
mm.
and destroying things. Um, so actually, I think it was Duncan Trussell on the Aubrey Marcus
I
podcast.
think Russell's good. Yeah, I like his.
Amazing. I
Yeah,
love him. And
hmm,
yeah, and because he was saying similarly to you, I think he was saying that he's optimistic about the way things will go,
mhm,
because yes, we're in this point now where there's a lot of hate on social media and misinformation, but we're just learning, like we're like children playing with this new toy, um, and
yeah,
hopefully it will head in the direction of being used for good.
right, yeah. I think it's really it's about this. It's one of the things again that I'm sort of that I admire so much about Medito is this sort of crowdsourced nature of it. I mean, you guys sort of you're the hub of it. You guys come together and you sort of organize people so that they can contribute to this goal. But fundamentally, it's all of these volunteers contributing to it. And of course, you guys put in so much work. I'm sure. I don't want to downplay that, but that it is a work of the people, and that it's
Exactly.
interest of the people. It would be hard to do it the same without. And of course, like there are these other companies that hire specialists, and they hire social media managers and everything, and they can put out this like you know regular thing, let's say, but then it's like you say, then something is kind of lost because they want to keep you they want you to keep paying for the subscription, right? So they're not trying to like teach you some fundamental truth.
Mm.
They're trying to get you to pay for the subscription, and if you learn some truth along the way, that's cool. But and it's the same thing I think with the social media now, is that like it's this attention economy that the whole purpose of all of these applications is just for you to use them. And they say that they like want you to, that it's about connection, that they want to, you connect with people. But it's like I can connect with people without social media. But social media wants me to like do it within their ecosystem so they can get a little bit of ad exposure, so they can get a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And fundamentally the whole point when it comes down to it is that like if they were to truly worry about connection, they probably wouldn't exist as a company very long, because once people are connected, or at least if they did, it wouldn't be in the same like you know billions of dollar valuation, like affecting global democracies, all over the
Mm,
world. It would just be like some sort of accessory to the human experience, which is what it should be fundamentally. I mean, it should, like, I think, like you say, that the social media, if it reaches this point where it's like truly kind of crowdsourced, let's say, it's hard to say. I'm not sure how that would look. I don't know like how that would manifest. But if it's like, but if there's some sort of central entity
mm,
that needs like sort of input from this interaction to exist, like, so Facebook is, let's say, this company is sort of needs you to interact with it to exist, and if you stop interacting, then it stops existing as it does, and so there's a certain survival mechanism where it begins to try and get you in there, and it's not like that's doing it because it's evil. It's just doing it because it needs to survive, right? Just like
mm,
another organism, right? And and but there's another like nature of it where it's sort of like expansive, eternally expansive, and wants to keep growing and growing, which is not necessarily a good thing. But it's that's when things become troublesome, I think, because then the core mission, which they say is like connection and socialization of of people, begins to become a secondary goal towards like
mm,
how long can we keep you on the app,
mm.
and
Yeah. Yeah, and like
so
is it called the social? I know what's that documentary on Netflix?
the social dilemma
The Social
is one of
Dilemma. Yeah,
those,
that's it.
yeah.
Yeah, and that just it's worrying because uh, I guess our generation. I guess you're around the same age as me. Our
Yeah.
generation, um, uh, we experienced the world without social media, and then we had childhood without social media, and then gone into adulthood within, and we've experienced both worlds. So
Hmm.
it's quite an interesting position to be in. But
Mm.
then like, children now, they're born into this world with social media and being attached to screens and these companies, which all they want to do is try to keep you on the apps as long as possible.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's kind of worrying to think what effect that might have on society in the long run, because
Mm.
it's like the children of today are the first ones to be being born into that world.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is kind of worrying.
I was when I look at the young kids, and you see those kids, like sometimes you're at a restaurant and you see like a family there, and one of the kids has the iPad and they're just like looking at them while the parents are talking, and you sort of feel like, oh man, that kid is missing some real human interaction right now. Is missing some worldly experience. But on the other side of it, I mean, maybe it's just you know, maybe it's just this age difference. But I will say, in some of my what's the word like oh, it's on the tip of my brain. It doesn't matter. But it's just like in my personal experience, let's say, I've met several kids here in Prague who are around between the ages of like 10 and 16, let's say, sometimes 17. And these kids give me a lot of hope, and it's partially, it's not that these kids are, like born in, not, at the, not in the depth of it, but I guess Facebook was, let's see, it's 2022, so 2012 would be 10 years ago, so 14 years, 2008. Okay, yeah, so like around the time Facebook started, these kids are like as old as Facebook, right?
Mm,
Roughly. And and when I see them, the way that they talk about environmental issues and about social issues, um, they're so much more engaged with it. And
mm,
I personally think that it's because, sure, they're like scrolling through TikTok and they're getting a lot of like, you know, um, kind of, let's say, meaningless things like entertainment, just like this, that's a nice video, oh yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. And every once in a while you'll get some truth will come through, like even
mm,
though these companies try and curate it so that you can stay on there, like real human experience and real life stuff just comes through there and exists on there. And the kids interact with it. And I do believe that people are truth seeking, so that they'll see it. And of course, if it triggers some emotion, they might just like react to that emotion. But over time, there's some truth-seeking effect where they'll begin to try and verify that, and things like, you know, um, things like climate change, like the social issues, especially in the States, where it's like this free society but not really free, that people
mm,
begin to see that and form strong opinions about it. And these kids who are 14, 15 now, who are exposed to this sort of like, these are the children of a global world, because they're forming opinions not just about the people in their immediate circles and the people around them, but the people like far away, and
Yeah.
the ice caps in the north, and the coastal cities that maybe thousands of miles away from them. And so they're forming an emotional connection with these things, and you can of course also say that there's some psychological risk here of like being overwhelmed with all this information and not knowing how to deal with it, and then just becoming super depressed or becoming like super militant or something like that, like that having all of this is not necessarily bringing balance to the child's psyche or well-being. And I think you have to watch the children and see how they observe with it. But I think then as the sort of adults in the room, like as those who are older, who maybe had the benefit of having some balance, like then what we have to do is like listen to the passion of those children
Mm.
and give them the sort of resources to act on climate change, to act on social issues, and to provide that structure, which is the same thing that maybe our parents were able to do for us, in a certain way. Like this is that. So of course the kids, if you're just to throw them into the fire, and say, all right, figure it out. If you aren't so crazy about climate change, then figure it out yourself. We're not going to help you, That's like, that's not how it works. They have the passion. They're sensing just like we are, they just haven't studied climatology for 15 years like that other guy at the university is, so that other guy at the university can talk to them, and they can intern, they can work together, and things can be done, so I think this is one thing that brings me some hope about the kids, is that they sense the world on a deeper level because they were
Mm.
born into that internet connection. Of course there's a lot of
Yeah.
noise, but people are, like I believe people are truth seeking, and
Yeah, that is a really good point actually, and
mm,
um, because you see, like the protests, with Greta Thunberg and
mm,
like the protests against climate change that have been led by the youth of the world.
yeah,
Like it's really good to see,
hmm,
and I think we've always got to keep hope alive anyway,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
because I think it can be quite easy to fall into like hopelessness, especially
hmm,
with the way things are portrayed on the news and everything. Um,
hmm,
because I've actually stopped watching the news, or reading the news rather so much. Because I used to always have the news on the home screen of my phone, and I'd always
oh,
be reading it every single day. And I feel so much better now that I don't do that. I don't feel particularly disconnected from what's going on because you hear about the important stuff anyway. It's just
hmm,
like reading in detail all this terrible news, because our brains are wired in a way that our attention is drawn to the negative stuff. And
hmm,
like, if something bad happens to you, like you mentioned the guy behind you in the traffic with road rage earlier, like if
yeah,
that happens, that sticks with you like the rest of your journey all the way home.
it
Like
does.
if somebody was like give you a friendly wave and a smile or whatever, that wouldn't stick with you,
Hmm.
because the
Not as
negative
strongly,
stuff.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
um so, and the news outlets know this, so they put the negative stories forward because that's what's going to get them viewers,
hmm,
uh,
and
and
clicks.
yeah, exactly.
They operate on the same sort of, especially the news sites that don't require like subscriptions,
Mm.
They operate on the same kind of principles as the social media websites, is that they get revenue from you clicking on their link, so something about like, you know uh, it's like my brother was actually talking about, like, I don't know if you remember uh, when it was in the 2000s, that everyone was talking about the hole in the ozone layer. Do you remember
Mm.
the hole in the ozone layer? And it was like this
Yeah.
huge thing. And it was like, everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's getting bigger. It's increased by 5 feet this year. It's getting bigger and bigger. And it was just like this doomsday thing. And then at one point, we just stopped hearing about it.
Yeah, what happened to that?
Well, I think, um, I'm not a scientist here, so like for those of you who know exactly the details, I apologize if I'm saying it incorrectly. But basically, there were some aerosols that we were emitting through somehow, and we just stopped doing it, and it
Mm.
closed, but that's the thing, is like that when it's opening, when it's like, oh my gosh, doomsday, doomsday, watch
Mm.
out everyone, everyone's like clicking and reading how many more centimeters today, oh my gosh, 4 more centimeters, what are we going to do, and then like and then one day we just figured, someone in policy is like, wait, maybe we should stop pumping this into the atmosphere. And then like, boop, and then it closes. And then everyone's like, okay, well, that's not news. So let's find out something else. The Afghan war, the Afghan war, So it kind of got, I mean, like, not that climate change is over, but like that hole in the ozone layer got closed up
Mm.
because there was a specific thing we were doing. And there's probably, you can find some news articles there, but the ratio of news articles talking about the hole and the increase and what it might mean, and oh, what to look at Venus, we can be like Venus soon, it's like going
Mm.
like this, and then just like, oh yeah, by the way, we solved that, and then it's like, and then it's gone. Now climate
Mm.
change is a much more severe, like what we're noticing now, the information we have now is much more robust than that was a very specific issue, but climate change in general is like this bigger thing. So but it's like you say, that like all of the talk about it sort of makes it easy to feel like it's this huge issue, and it is a huge issue, but to feel like it's an insurmountable issue, let's say,
Mm.
that it's something that we can't get over, and that we will just, that we're doomed by this, and we're all screwed, and there's nothing to do, and we might as well, like, I don't know, just do drugs and live this hedonist lifestyle to the end of our lives, and just, screw it, why not? And this is an act of hopelessness,
Mm.
but to me, like, I'm not, I understand this, because I feel like I inhabited that for a long time, but for a way of living, I just, it feels like what this does, like, if you accept the hopelessness, of course, the world isn't burning right now. Things are changing, right? We can feel that change. We can feel something happening, right? But the world, we're not living in an inhabitable world right now, right? But we can be, we could be. So if I sit here in my room right now in this habitable world so far, and say, well, it's going to all burn up, there's nothing we can do, we're all going to die, what I've done internally is guaranteed that my action is not going to do anything to stop that. I've
Mm.
just turned off the possibility that I can do anything about it, and that, like, now that might be true, like, it might be true that there's nothing we can do about it. We don't, but like, and some of the science and scientists say that that's where we are, right? But it's like, I was talking to a friend of mine who is um, who I would say is working through this, like, this kind of this hopelessness, and he was saying, like, what are we gonna do? Like, how could, like, there's no, yeah, what do we do in this world? What does a young guy like us do when you're trying to make some plans for the future, but all the information is telling us that in 20 years that the world is going to look completely different. There's going to be, we're going to live in some post-apocalyptic world. And it was like, well, the only thing you can do is just like keep living with hope and keep like watering your garden, like water your garden and love your neighbor. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, I think that's if the world is really going to this place, this like terrible, deathly place, and there's nothing we can do about it, like, if that's true, then it's even more important to love your family, to give love to the people around you, and to take care of the plants and the place you have around you. Like, that's so much more fundamental, because if that's the only bastion of love and hope and light, then that's like the most precious thing on the world. And like, you as an individual should, like, not say, well, fine, screw it, like,
Yeah.
it's understandable, but I think that the reason why we go to this, like, oh, screw it place, is because we feel like it's lost and there's nothing we can do.
Mm.
But the fact is that, like, even if everything gets lost around you, there is something you can do. And then you see girls like girls, boys, kids like Greta Thunberg, who are getting up and standing and creating a movement around it.
Mm.
And you think, like, wait a second. So if I can water my garden, maybe I can also help my neighbors water their garden. Maybe I can create an irrigation system that isn't using this polluted water. Maybe actually we can do some co-op, and then it begins to expand and expand. But if you just give up right away, then none of that is ever possible. You guarantee that that hopeless scenario that you're so afraid of is going to happen, and that's
Yeah.
the trouble with it,
Yeah.
but of
Yeah,
course.
and because I guess if you start with that, the big idea. So, oh yeah, I'm going to build an irrigation system for my whole city.
Mhm.
Um, then it would just seem overwhelming and impossible
Right.
to do. Like, how am I ever going to do anything like that?
Mhm.
So that's why, like you say, it's good to start small, and you feel like you can't do anything to change all of the suffering in the world. But what you
Mhm.
can do is, in your very immediate vicinity, help people who are suffering. If you help
Yeah.
one person who is suffering, if you help to alleviate the suffering of that one other living sentient being,
Mhm.
then that's the place to start, and you can
That's
go from
yeah.
there.
Exactly, exactly, and if that's all you manage to do, that's still pretty good, Like, if you just manage to help this one person, or even just, like, help your help yourself, not help yourself at the expense of others, but sort of like, if no one else can be helped around you and you just have to
Mm,
make yourself good, then that's one person,
yeah.
and I think what we find is that we're much more capable than that. But yeah, that's the issue, and I think that's the thing with climate change, which seems like such this huge thing with so many problems, so many pieces of it that are like, where do we begin? It's like, oh my gosh, and those companies, they're the ones. Oh, we can't change the companies. Oh, they need to do this. Oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to recycle, but the recycling doesn't do anything. Oh my gosh, and then it just like it snowballs, and I think the yeah yeah, it is, which actually, coming full circle here, it's like, this is where mindfulness kind of comes in, right? Is that, like, to look at your to be mindful of your immediate surroundings and of the people
Mm,
around you and of the things that you can work with, and engaging with them. It's like, I could be, like, sitting on the tram, going to work, and like, oh, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And there's you know, some little boy or some old lady who just needs a smile that day, but I'm there frowning and thinking about something else, not able to
yeah.
connect with them, and if I just give them that smile, that would brighten that day, if I can just be in that moment, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's
And,
so
and
well.
yeah, and that will not only change or help or improve the lives of the people who are around you, but
Mm,
like, how much happier are you in that situation? Instead of just fretting and worrying about what's going to happen at work in a few hours,
yeah.
you're mindfully engaging in a compassionate way with the people around you. That makes
Hmm.
you happy. It makes them happy. Like, that
Yeah.
is the whole point in mindfulness and compassion, isn't it? Like, it can
Yeah.
change the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a big difference, and especially with those, like, on the younger and the older end of the spectrum. I feel like these people are really, these are the true mindful warriors, let's say. I've
Mm,
seen, so, like, I remember I was on the little rental scooter in Prague yesterday, and there was a little boy crossing the street with his father, and his father was trying to, like, say, like, okay, the light's going to turn red, and now it's red, and we have to stop, and then it's going to turn green, and we have to cross, and he was like, and I could see him, like, he was like pointing, and the little boy was just like looking at me on the scooter, he was just like, what's that, and what's the dad doing, and the dad, like, even at one point, like, physically, like, turned the boy's head and was like pointing at the thing, and the boy was like looking, and then looked back at me like this, and it was just like, and I was there, and I just said ahoy, which is Czech for, like, hi, ahoy, and then he's just like brightened up and was ahoy, he was just like seeking that interaction in that moment. Like, he was
mm,
much more interested in the scooter and the guy on the scooter than he was about the rules of crossing the street, even though, of course, that's important too. But it was like it was a really nice moment. I've made it a sort of a goal of mine to say hi to any child that makes eye contact with me.
mm.
They're like looking at me. Sometimes they have that look of like, what the heck is going on? You're like, hi. And they're like, oh, it's a human being. Oh, hi. I love that. So yeah, it's like you say, it's good for me and it's good for them. I feel good doing that, and they feel good,
Mm.
and that general feeling of goodness, then we both bring that into other parts of our life, and the more of that there is, like, maybe the brighter the world will be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, we're coming up to an hour now, so I
Yeah.
think that's quite a nice place to end it, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the
Yeah.
hope and happiness.
That's good.
Um, yeah.
So
So
I
thank
really,
you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And again, I think, like, I speak for all of your users, and myself included, that that your mission is really important. I think as long as you keep doing it, and there's going to be people there who want to participate and who find value in it. So thank you for from all of us, for what you do and for organizing this whole thing, the
Thank
Medito
you.
experience.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Mhm. Yes, thank you.